You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lemons podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're gonna make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show.
Yeah, so my name is Elyn Kazarian. I work primarily in the music industry as a creative director and graphic designer. And as of recently, I have also been helping out with creating a radio show through an organization called shesaid.so. I'm sure a lot of people might know about it, at least people that work in the music industry should know about it. But at the end of 2017, essentially they were looking for volunteers, and I signed up for it. I went to the first meeting that they had, and I asked them if they ever had thought about creating a podcast. And somebody had tried, I think someone that was based in Berlin had tried to start up a podcast for She Said So, but then it didn't work out. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about the technical aspect of creating a podcast, but sign me up, because I'm a podcast junkie and I was pretty certain that I could figure it out with whoever else wanted to work on the show with me. So essentially that podcast idea then turned into a radio show on Dublab, which is a local internet radio station here in Los Angeles. So I work both as a designer and I co-host this show. It's called She Said So LA Radio, and it happens once a month on Dublab. So it's really exciting.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you have that kind of can-do attitude, and you took initiative and you just jumped into it. So tell me a little bit about why you wanted to just sign me up. Were you a little bit nervous about kind of failing in that aspect of you don't know anything about the technical aspects, but you're like, sign me up, let's do it?
Oh, I was horrified. I was like, the minute I raised my hand and I told the founder, Andrea, who's there on that day, when I told her to sign me up for it, I was like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? I was excited in the sense that obviously this was something that I had wanted to do for a long time, actually. I had wanted to start a podcast, but I didn't want to do it on my own. I wanted it to be something special, and I wanted it to be with a group of people for whatever reason. And so I was hoping that there would be other people in the group on that day during the volunteer meeting that would be interested, just as interested, and there were, thankfully. But yeah, I was terrified. I mean, it was like I was excited and I wanted to do it, but then I was like, oh crap, what did I get myself into? So yeah, definitely.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about She Said So and what the show kind of discusses for those that may not know what the show's about?
Yeah, so She Said So is an organization, like I mentioned earlier. We work primarily within the music industry. There's a lot of women within the organization, but it's not like, a feminist organization that hates men. And it's really about allyship and mentoring other women in the industry, supporting other women, highlighting and empowering other women in the industry. And then the radio show is a hybrid talk show / music show. So essentially, we have a guest on once a month for an interview during the first hour of the show. And then during the second hour, we do our best to try and have either a DJ on for a live DJ set or some sort of live performance. And thus far, we've had guests for an interview and then a DJ set. So we're hoping that we can transition into having live performances as well.
That'd be really cool. And I see that you put in your Google form that you had filled out when you originally requested to be on the show, you put that the music industry is a very difficult industry to navigate, and I can completely attest to that. I am still trying to figure out where to even start within this hectic industry. And you put that you wanted to show that women, queer women of color, and that anything is possible that you can set your mind to. And you also want to kind of dedicate yourself and kind of showing yourself that there is possible to change the world and what you can do to change the world. So can you tell people about that mission and why you think it's so important in today's industry?
Absolutely. So I am a queer woman of color, and for me, I always felt like it was just having been surrounded by other people within the industry, I didn't directly, thankfully, experience any discrimination, but I definitely was seeing it around me. And, part of me weirdly feels kind of guilty that I've never experienced that discrimination. I don't know why. But I don't know if it's my level of confidence. I don't know if I just come off a certain way where people don't really mess with me in that way. But, I was seeing it a lot around me, and it was really disheartening. And I wanted to make sure that I at least was, an example, a good example for other people and for other queer people in the community and for other women and for people of color. And I wanted them to know for certain that if they put their mind to something, that they will, in fact, be able to succeed in whatever they want to do. So that's really part of why I do what I do. It's like I'm a designer, I'm a creative director, and all that stuff is great. Like, I'm able to work with some amazing artists on a daily basis, and that's awesome. But I really have to think about in terms of legacy, like what am I going to leave behind when I'm not here anymore? And I want to make sure that I'm able to help people in a way that maybe isn't necessarily anything to do with my design work. I really want to be able to be an inspiration to others in the most positive way so that other people know that they also can do whatever they want to do. If they truly set their mind to it, and if they go after it, anything is possible. I really believe that.
100%. And it's all about kind of taking initiative. And if there's something you want to do, then you've just got to literally step foot and just start doing it, because we've learned in this industry that it's just not going to fall in your lap. That's just not how it works. And success comes to those who work very hard to achieve it. So what do you want to leave behind as your legacy? Have you really thought about this?
I haven't thought about it deeply, but I do want to be able to give back to the community in some way. And I do believe that at least having the opportunity to help start this radio show has been a way, because we all do this show for free. It's a passion project, and we all wanted to do it because, we all felt a similar way about the music industry, and we wanted to be able to be the positive influence in the community. So I think having the opportunity to start this radio show has been a great way to help give back in a way that I don't know if I'm able to, at least through my design work. I know for certain, people have reached out to me and have said that, they love my work and they love, all the album covers that I've worked on and this and that feels amazing. But I just don't know how much of an influence that is actually having in the way that I hope that it does. Maybe it does, and I don't know. But I think for me, being able to have these long conversations with people on air and really talking about their experiences, being able to listen to other people and see what kind of trials and tribulations they've gone through and how they've navigated those paths is far more interesting to me. And I think it also allows other people who listen to those conversations to feel a little bit less alone, because I know for certain that, I haven't really had many mentors in my life. And so the show especially, or if I have any conversation with anyone that I happen to meet or that I'm close friends with, it's like everybody has the opportunity to learn from one another if we really allow ourselves to keep our minds open and to listen to another person's story and to really just understand where they're coming from, because I think we can be really easy to judge people, especially, depending on their background or where they work or whatever. Like, we're just so quick to judge people. But if we truly take a moment to listen to someone and to listen to their story and we end up finding out that we have a lot of similarities, we have a lot of things in common, we may not have gone through, similar experiences in the same exact way, but we've all felt similarly at some point in our lives. So I think that that's something really important. And I think to go back to your question about legacy, I really want to be able to continue doing this kind of work where, I'm having conversations with people and somehow it connects with someone out there in the world and it allows them to feel a little bit less alone.
That's amazing, because I think even if it connects with one person, that means, you've left some kind of legacy, regardless of how big or small it may be. And if you can connect with one person, then that definitely changed that one person. And that's partially why I started the podcast as well, because this is just kind of a passion project for me. I really enjoy sitting down and connecting with other talented people like yourself and creative people who have a vision for their dreams and for their industries. And I really think that everybody has a unique story to tell, and we can sit and talk to somebody for hours on end, and we just hear their unique story, and somebody's always got something to say. And if we just kind of sit down and not always have an opinion about something, we may learn something. And I think that's very important. And so you're an artist, you're a visual artist, a creative director, and a graphic designer, and a radio host. So you wear many hats. How did you get into creative directing and becoming a graphic designer and art and stuff like that? How did you kind of get into that?
Art was something that I always loved. I mean, my mom tells me that I was drawing from the age of 2, so it was something that I always loved. My parents both loved art themselves. I come from a background where both on my dad's side and my mom's side, we have visual artists and musicians. And so art and music were always part of my life growing up. And by the time I was 5, my mom put me in piano lessons, and I played piano until I was about 16, 17, 18, around those ages. I mean, seriously going to practices and doing, recitals and that sort of thing. So the two things were always a huge part of my life. And by the time I was thinking about going to college, funny enough, this was actually in middle school. I was already thinking about college. I had an art teacher who had known somebody that had gone to Art Center in Pasadena. And he told me that I would probably love it there. And I still remember the day when we went on his computer, and at the time they were still sending out these thick catalogs to whoever wanted one. And so he basically filled out whatever form he needed to fill out online so that I could receive this catalog in the mail. And I remember when I got it in the mail, I was so excited. It just felt without even having signed up or anything, I was just so excited to know that this school existed, and that there was this possibility that I could go at some point. And so I had taken art classes all throughout my high school years as well. And then my mother also put me in these Art Center. They were these high school classes that you could take to help prepare your portfolio. So I started taking those classes as well. And essentially I built up my portfolio, and I just basically signed up only for Art Center. It was my dream school to go there. And so signed up, we just followed through, and I couldn't believe it, but I got in because I had been hearing that it was a really difficult school to get into. And so I was a little bit nervous. I already had a backup plan. I thought that if I didn't get into Art Center immediately after graduating high school, that I would maybe go to PCC or, some sort of community college and just get ready and then apply again. And I thankfully got in right out of high school. So I ended up being in the illustration department, and I was in the fine art painting track for my time there. And I actually had thought about just being a painter, having a studio practice, potentially working at a gallery, just to be able to get by. And I ended up doing an internship while I was in school, and I realized that it really wasn't the world that I wanted to be part of. And the internship was a great experience in that sense. It allowed me to figure out what I really wanted. And by the time I was preparing to graduate, this was like late 2012. This was at a time when SoundCloud was still a thing. A lot of bedroom producers would use it. There were all of these different collectives popping up, and it was just like the place to be. I would go on there, being the music junkie that I am, I would just go on there for hours on end every day and find new music. And I started quickly realizing that just having a little bit of experience, taking courses that had to do with graphic design, I was like, I think I could probably put these two things together. So this idea of taking a visual image and putting it to music just worked so perfectly in my mind. So what I ended up doing was I started reaching out to various people that I felt like I would somehow, I was like, their music feels like my work would be a good fit for, or I would think about even labels. I would be like, oh, maybe I should reach out to Warp or to XL or like all of these different indie labels that I was really into. And so I started reaching out to people and I started getting responses to my surprise. I was like, oh my God, it's actually happening. And while I was a student at Art Center, I got my first freelance job creating a single cover for this label, this local label called Modern Filth. And it essentially took off from there. So by the time I graduated, about a few months after, I ended up working at a music venue here. And then I worked there for about a year. And after that, I started working at an artist management company for about a year and a half. And since early 2017, I have been self-employed. And I've been doing a lot of the same sorts of projects, working on album covers and album campaigns and branding and all that sort of stuff. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but art has always been part of my life and music has always been part of my life. So I essentially just put two and two together and now I'm here. So
Absolutely. And I think with art, you can't be closed-minded. You have to be open to really allowing your mind to truly flow, because you never know when you're going to be inspired and when you're going to, hit that next break of, this next big project that may pay your rent for the next 3, 4, 5 months. So these types of things come up all over the place. And that's the thing in my vision. I've always viewed like graphic designers as one of the most fluent and one of the most kind of free people, because honestly, you can take whatever project, like you can take, for you, it's more music, but you can have somebody who maybe designs logos for like software companies, or maybe they design, like you said, for museums. You can take all of that, and all of that can kind of come together, and you can really kind of immerse yourself in the vibe of the company or the museum or whatever the person, whatever it may be, and just kind of create something completely different that's still your style. And I think that's so cool to be able to do that. So do you have kind of a favorite part or a favorite like project that you've worked on, and can you tell us about that project, of course, without violating any contracts?
Right. So probably my favorite my favorite project that I've worked on as of recently was working on the album campaign for Mat Zo. He's an electronic artist, and I was working at the artist management company at the time, and we essentially ended up rebranding his image from the very beginning, and then we ended up working on the album campaign for about a year and a half. Essentially, my time there, we ended up working on that project, and that was really exciting because it was literally from the ground up. We had to do everything. So I ended up researching all these different artists that we ended up hiring, and we ended up starting with creating his own logo, so rebranding his logo, but then also rebranding his label logo. We ended up hiring a photographer named Luca Piero, who created all of his press photos. He also helped with the album cover a little bit at the end. We found a production company that rendered out the 3D printer that you see on the album cover. And then we worked with designer. Well, he helped with the logo, but my role was to research, source, and present these artists to the managers and work with the artists from the beginning to create a mood board, and then be able to send that mood board out to whatever artists that we were going to work with, you know, to help with the project. And then at the very end, when we had everything put in place and we were ready to go with, you know, creating the physical packages, that's where I helped with the layout and the design of the vinyl package, which was really exciting. I mean, that's really album artwork is my bread and butter. So that's always when I'm able to work on a project that's for, you know, physical packaging rather than just a digital album cover or a digital single cover. It's just a completely different feeling when it's all printed and everything's ready to go, and then you're able to hold that thing in your hands. It's just such an exciting feeling. So that, as of recently, was one of my favorite projects, mostly because it was literally the whole, like, it was just the whole thing. So yeah, that was one of the most exciting projects I've worked on.
Wow, that sounds like quite an endeavor. And I'm hugely involved in the electronic music scene. I write for some big electronic blogs, so I see a lot of these press releases come through, and I'm sure I've seen some of your pictures and your artwork come through my email to potentially write for one of the publications I write for. So that's really, really cool to see that you've worked on Mat Zo and his completely rebrand. So that was like a huge project to kind of rebrand somebody from the ground up like that. I can imagine the time and the work that went into a project like that. Were there any, like, I'm sure there were some roadblocks along the way as you were creating that work and kind of going through that project. What were some of those roadblocks, and kind of how did you come over them or overcome them, being that it was such a large project, without kind of setting yourself back and keeping on track?
There actually surprisingly weren't that many roadblocks with that particular project. What was so great was that when I ended up meeting with Matt and with his management one of the first days, he kind of already had a pretty clear idea as to what he was looking for the project in terms of the artwork and just the entire vision for the campaign itself, which was really, really great. I mean, he clearly articulated what he wanted, and, you know, I came in with this great understanding of what he was looking for. And then, you know, this was at a time when we were still just figuring things out. I mean, I helped create this mood board that was like, you know, the vision board for everybody to see, whoever was going to work on the project. So, thankfully, I think due to the fact that Matt had a good idea of what he was looking for, it ended up not creating any roadblocks, because if there was a roadblock, I would have remembered. But it really was such a smooth project to work on from, you know, point A to point B. There were no real difficulties that came up or anything bad that happened. You know, it was just a really, really great process. And all of the people that we ended up working with were really great. I think maybe the only slightly scary situation that ended up coming up was working with the photographer, with Luca Piero. We ended up actually having to fly Matt out to, I believe it was Milan. I know we had to fly him out to Italy because Luca was in Italy at that time. And so we had to fly him out there to get the photos done. And so I was just a little bit scared. I mean, this was my very first time, you know, working on a project that was this massive, and just making sure that everything was going to go well while Matt was there working with the photographer was just a little bit frightening for me, but it ended up working out really well at the end. So that was maybe the only thing that I was just a little bit worried about, but everything else ended up working out so smoothly that it was a really, really great process.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and I'm sure you wish all projects could go as smoothly as that one did.
Right.
And I'm sure that doesn't happen very often where you have a project that goes so smoothly. Like, can you tell us about maybe a time where you had an artist or a project that you were just told, like, I want to rebrand, and you really didn't have any kind of direction like Matt had provided you? And how did you kind of navigate through that?
Right. So there have been situations where I've worked with artists, whether it's a rebrand or it's, album cover or single cover or anything like that. And, I love the fact that some artists will give you the freedom to work on a project, and they'll just be like, oh, do whatever you want, listen to the song and do whatever you want. And that's all really great. And I like that because that shows me that the person trusts me and my vision. So that's really nice. But then at the same time, sometimes they'll say something like that and you'll make the artwork for them, but then they'll be like, no, I don't really know. And so there's a lot of back and forth. So usually what I end up doing is I ask up front for 3 particular references, whether it's from my own website, so any previous work of mine, or it's something that they already have in mind. They just want to do like a quick Google search, or they just have a few concepts in mind. So I ask them for things like that up front so that we kind of have a better idea, or a starting off point. So whenever there is a situation like that where there is a lot of back and forth, at least, I ask the person if they can just take maybe a day and think it through and see if they can come back to me with at least some reference, just so that we don't end up wasting so much time going back and forth without ever really coming to a solid conclusion. So that's really the way that I end up navigating it, because there are instances like that where sometimes the artist doesn't know what they want, and that's okay. Not everybody knows from the very beginning what they want, and sometimes they just want to be able to see something, and then maybe that's not the one, but it inspires them, to have a different idea, and then we end up building from there.
Okay. But, and at the same time, at the end of the day, like, this is your vision, like, you might be doing the art, but at the end of the day, like, the artist is the one that has to present this and use this in their work, in their press materials, on their website, on their social media, all, so if you don't like it, you need to make sure that, like, this is your time to really tell me, like, what you want and work with me. So that's how important this is. Like, you're going to have to live with this. I'm just creating the art, and then it's on you.
Right.
So you've got to make sure that you're telling me what you want so I can, work forward and make sure that you're getting what you really want and deserve. So going back just a little bit, you talked about like the digital portion and then the physical portion, like holding that physical artwork in your hands is like, I'm sure it's like a surreal experience. So what's kind of the difference between like creating digital art versus physical art? Are there any like contrasting elements that you have to do maybe differently when you're creating, when it's going to be for an album cover, like a physical album cover, versus if it's just going to be a digital copy?
Well, with a physical album, it's more about, with me at least, the way that I think about it is, since the album itself is telling a story, then the package itself, in my opinion, needs to tell a story too. So when I work on a digital album cover, it's the front cover. There's no back cover, there's no, gatefold LP, there's none of that. There's no booklet, nothing. So it really is just the front cover and being able to tell a story just with that flat image. But then with a package, especially if I'm working on a vinyl package, if it is gatefold, then there's just so many exciting things that you can do with a physical package to be able to tell something exciting, to be able to share this story with the world in a way that, you can't really do in any other way. I have to end up thinking about, okay, like, there's a front and back cover, but if it's a gatefold LP, what are we going to do on the inside? What are we going to do for the sleeves? How are we going to incorporate color? How are we going to incorporate text? How are we going to lay out the text? Are we going to use a specific texture for the package itself? Are we going to use specific paper? Like, there's just so many things that you can do. Debossing, embossing. I mean, the possibilities are essentially endless. I mean, sure, it ends up being a little bit more costly depending on what sorts of materials you end up using. But I think what's exciting for me, especially just thinking back on when I was a kid, and, my mom had a lot of CDs, and she would have music playing in the house for hours. And when I was really young and I was still at home, when I was like 4 years old, I still have memories of just like opening up the little CD that she had and looking through it and looking through the booklet. And I would do that continuously throughout my life. It was just, I loved it so much. And so I want to be able to bring that experience to other people. I want other people, when they open up, a CD, or if it is a gatefold LP and they open it up, I want them to have that same sort of feeling of excitement, and it's a completely different feeling compared to looking at something on, your computer or on your phone, where it's just the artwork itself, just that digital image. They're two completely different worlds.
Okay. And do you have a favorite gatefold project that you had worked on? And why was it your favorite? What were your kind of favorite elements about that?
Well, it was actually that Mat Zo LP. Yeah, it was that Mat Zo one. And it was because even for the inner portion of the gatefold, I ended up finding this artist. He was a matte painter, and matte painters typically work in the film industry. And so he ended up creating these really surreal looking environments. And to give a little bit of backstory, so the album took place 80 years from now, when these 3D printers printed human beings. So this was the whole concept around the album itself. And so the inner portion of the gatefold LP just had these like really surrealistic looking environments in there. And so I just remember when the day-to-day manager brought the LP down and gave it to me, I was like, holy shit. Like I was not expecting it on that day. Like nobody had told me when it was going to be ready. It was just such an exciting moment. So yeah, it was that one for sure.
Absolutely. And I'll definitely have to link like that kind of project in Mat Zo in the show notes as well, so people can check that out and see why it was such an amazing project to be a part of. So transitioning just a little bit now, you completely work independently now. Can you tell us like what it's like working as an independent graphic artist and kind of doing what you do?
It's great in a lot of ways because you have the freedom to work on whatever project you want to work on. So that's really nice. And you can work from home, or you can work from, wherever you feel comfortable in. If it's a WeWork office, it's a WeWork office. If it's, a cafe or something, whatever floats your boat. But for me, I work from home, and so it gives me the luxury of not having to be stuck in traffic, especially here in Los Angeles, where it just feels like it's getting worse and worse as the years go by. So it's nice to not have to worry about that. It's nice to not have to worry about any other sorts of like expenses, related to having to drive for so many hours in a day to work and back. But at the same time, I think you have to have a very dedicated kind of personality, and you really have to be driven because you have to be the one that sets everything up for yourself. I mean, you just have to have a certain amount of discipline to be able to wake up every morning and do whatever is necessary to take yourself to the next level. And I think, if you're working at a company full time, there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. And it is something that I am still open to. So, if a full-time opportunity were to come around, or I find something that feels fitting, yeah, absolutely, I'm still open to it. But I think, a full-time job where you're going there every day and it creates that routine for you, you become a little bit comfortable, and I think it could potentially, especially for a designer, for an artist, it could create you might end up becoming stagnated. Like you might not want to learn anything new anymore because you are comfortable. And you might not want to challenge yourself to learn new things and to do new things, to try something that you may have wanted to try for a really long time, but you just don't end up getting to it. You keep holding off on it and you don't do it again, because I think that the fact that a full-time job offers you that comfort, you don't really do those sorts of things. So when you're working for yourself, sure, you might still not go after something that you might be interested in trying out, but I think it allows a little bit more of an opportunity to give it a try if you want, and like when I was 25, it was I think like end of August, September, and I just had this like breakdown moment. Things were a little bit difficult financially, and I felt like I was missing something in my life. And I was finally like, you know what? I want to learn guitar. Like, it was just this moment where I was like, I want to learn guitar. I've always wanted to. Ever since I was 5 years old, it was actually the instrument I wanted to learn. But then my mom was like, nah, that's a boy's instrument. You're not going to learn. I'm going to put you in piano. So I finally there was a local music shop where I live, and I went there and I bought a guitar. And the first day I got back home with that guitar, I got on YouTube and I started playing. I don't know how long I played, but essentially I played until my index finger started bleeding. And I was like, okay, I think like I found something that is truly inspiring me in a way that nothing else was at that moment. So it gave me that opportunity, that time when things were a little bit slow and things were a little bit hard financially. I wasn't really working on any projects. It was a rough time. I had that opportunity to learn something that I had wanted to learn for years. And I could have easily not have done it because, I was in a shit place, and I should have continued to look for jobs, which I was doing, but maybe at a much I could have done other things, you know what I mean? So I decided to do something that, has still not brought me anything to my career per se. It's just something that I love doing. It's a hobby. And I don't think I would have had the time to do that if I was working a full-time job. So that, it has pros and cons working for yourself, but I think that if you are comfortable with that sort of lifestyle, then you'll be fine doing it, no matter, how many, downsides you end up coming across or how many setbacks you end up coming across.
How are you constantly like keeping yourself updated with the world of graphic design, and how are you continually like searching out and finding new clients, or how do you keep clients from coming back to you and things like that? Like, because freelancing is very difficult, and like you said, it takes a certain kind of person and mindset to do it. And some people can and some people can't, and that's totally okay. But for somebody that's maybe looking to get into graphic design and just being a freelancer, having that kind of creative freedom like you do have, how do you keep work coming in, and how do you keep the bills paid?
Well, part of it is you have to reach out to people. You have to maintain a certain level of diligence when it comes to reaching out to people that you're interested in working with. And then another part of it is just putting in the work, like make work for yourself, make personal work and put it out there, and people will come to you. So it's kind of a 50-50 where you do have to do some work in terms of reaching out to people. I mean, people are not, like you said earlier, things don't just fall on your lap. You clearly have to put in the work. So that goes, at least in my experience, it's been that, I've reached out to people, I've gotten responses, thankfully. And then at the same time, I've dedicated a certain amount of time every day to make work for myself, whether that has been just drawing in my sketchbook, or if it's been, opening up Photoshop and just making something for myself, not having any sort of expectations or any sort of end goal. It's just playing around and experimenting and allowing myself to explore things that I didn't think that I would have, if I didn't give myself that opportunity. And then on the other hand, in terms of like staying up to date and with trends, or just giving myself the opportunity to continue to learn new skills or to hone in on certain skills and really like mastering them. Something that I've personally done is I've gone on lynda.com for like these last few months. I've just gone on every single day for a certain number of hours a day. And if anybody is unaware, lynda.com is free with a public library card. So if you are interested, go and get a public library card and make sure you know that your library has access to lynda.com, because that site has been such a blessing in so many ways. I had access to it when I was a student at Art Center, but with the amount of work that we had there, I mean, I don't know if anybody really used it. I know I didn't that much, but as of recently, a friend of mine was like, hey, so I heard that it's free with a library card. I don't know, look into it. And I did, and by God, it was true. And I was like, oh my God, this incredible site that has tutorials to so many different anything that you may be interested in, it has tutorials for. It's crazy. So the minute I signed up for my library card, I got home and I was like, all right, I'm going to watch anything and everything that I'm interested in, and anything that I feel like I need to really, any skills that I have that I really need to master in, I'm going to do it. And it's been fantastic. So I think that's also another important thing. And when I was talking about earlier about how certain people can get comfortable in any situation that they're in their careers because, I don't know, maybe they've come across a certain level of success, or they just feel comfortable in the situation that they're in. I think it's really important to allow yourself the time to seek out things like this and to really learn and to just improve, because if you're in this for the long game, you have to be able to do things like that for yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to come and go, and it's truly up to you as far as how much of a legacy you want to leave behind. And yeah, so I think that continuously learning is really important.
Absolutely, and knowledge is power. And knowledge is absolutely power. And I always kind of view like the creative, whether you're music or you're a graphic designer or you're some kind of audio engineer, whatever you're doing in the creative world, I always vision it like a race. I always think that I'm running alongside. I'm always in first place. You got to kind of toot your own horn every once in a while. But I always vision myself being kind of in first place. And there's somebody that is running right alongside me, and they are just about to pass me or whatever. So you always have to vision there's somebody that's working just as hard or maybe a little bit harder than you, that if that opportunity or that finish line comes first, they're going to cross it before you do. So you always have to kind of keep up to date, and the more stuff you learn and the more stuff you kind of put in your creative tool belt, the better off you will be when those opportunities come about.
I agree. Yeah.
So that's and like you said, lynda.com is such a blessing. I had it as a student when I was a student as well, and it's like YouTube on steroids. Like, you have these industry professionals in whatever industry you're interested in, software, creative, music, cloud technologies, whatever it is, there is a video for it. There's a whole course for it. And you can literally sit down and they will break down everything. I mean, I have like over 100 hours of courses, like just playlisted, that I'm like, I need to watch this. So there's so much to learn on there, and there's so much good content on there. So this isn't an advertisement.
It's such an incredible resource, and it's crazy. Like, I've had conversations with other friends of mine who did not know that they could still access lynda.com just with the public library card. And I was like, get on it, because if you want to be able to learn a new skill, or you just have an interest, I don't know, maybe it's there's a wealth of business courses on there too. I mean, just there's such great advice that you can get just by watching some business course, or even if you have questions about taxes or something. I mean, there literally, as you said, is a course for everything. And it's amazing. I am so happy that it exists and that it's free with the public library card. I can't, it's just so exciting to me.
That's cool because I get it through my job for free. But when I no longer work there, when that time comes, that's good to know. I've heard of it, but I completely forgot that if you have a public library card, that it comes free. So that's really good to know. I'll definitely have to remember that. And like you said, they're not even there's simple courses like Mac 101 Basics or Windows 101 Basics. And then you can get up to very, very advanced courses, where you're actually learning how to code websites and code software program, make a program from the ground up, so, and even maybe you have a speech or a presentation you have to give. Well, there's a 2-hour long course on how to practice public speaking or some notes or how to present yourself. Maybe you have to create a PowerPoint. Well, there's a PowerPoint program course as well. So there's just, like you said, there's just endless videos and courses to watch.
Right.
Bottom line, if you're creative, get that public library card and get on lynda.com get on lynda.com. If there's anything you learned from this episode, is get on lynda.com.
Yeah.
So going back just a little bit, again, before we got on our soapbox on lynda.com, how do you kind of reach out to these clients, and what are you kind of tailoring your messages when you're reaching out to certain projects, and how are you kind of reaching out to these people? Hey, do you have any upcoming projects, or is it just hey, I saw you posted on Twitter, you see you're going on tour. Do you need any help with that? Anything like that?
I mostly send out any sort of if I have an interest in an artist or something, it is primarily through email. So I'll reach out to these people via email. But yeah, they are tailored. I mean, my emails are all tailored to everybody that I reach out to. And that's just something that's important to me. I don't like sending out these really, it almost feels like it's a facade when it's just such a simple, basic email. It when you read it, it just feels like it. And so for me, it's important to tailor it. And the tailoring really comes from the fact that because I consider myself a music nerd and just a junkie for this kind of stuff, it's I'm always on the lookout for new music. And when I come across somebody that just inspires me in some way, and I really want to work with that person, yeah, I look into them. I do a little bit of research before I contact them. I listen to their music, and I try to get to know them and understand them through their music before I contact them. So that's really important for me. I don't like to send out any sort of message, even if it's not on email, even if it is just, an Instagram message or something. It's important for me to be able to tailor it in a way that is authentic. It feels wrong either way for me to send out just some basic, message to somebody.
Mm-hmm. And people can see right through that stuff. They can tell if it's an automated thing or if it's just a mass email or anything like that.
Yeah, and you'll see, I've gotten emails before where somebody has been interested, and you'll see, a certain portion of the email they typed out in that moment, but then another portion of it, the font is different or the size is different, and you can clearly tell that it's just been copied and pasted from, some other email that they sent out. And I'm just did you think this through before sending it out? Because I don't know if they really think about the fact that somebody can pick up on that or see that and really think about it. But yeah, it happens all the time. And that for me is a number one, it's the number one red flag. So yeah.
And so when you're finding, you're a huge music person, so that's kind of the things you target. And do you specifically target electronic music, or do you have other genres that you kind of go for?
No, I definitely electronic music just happened to be the genre that I ended up, at least as far as when I initially started, it somehow organically ended up being that electronic music was fitting for my work. But I love all genres of music. I'm not even that person that says I listen to everything except country, because I actually love country too. Now, there may be certain genres that I don't necessarily go to, on a day-to-day basis. I don't seek out, but I still will have an admiration for it, even if it's not something that I love. I'll still see certain influences that other genres may have had on it, and I just love to pick up on that. I love picking up on the history that a certain genre could have gone through. It's that sort of thing is really exciting for me. So I want to be able to work with more artists that are in different genres, such as country, or R&B, or whatever the case may be. It's like I have a true love and admiration for music, period.
The professionals in their craft, there are many professionals across many different industries. And when you look at them, they're very, very good at doing one thing. You look at like Bill Gates, you look at like Elon Musk, they're very good at one specific thing. And that comes down to being a creative as well. Like when you look at like musicians or producers or engineers, they're very good at writing songs or producing music, or maybe they're really good at vocal producing, or maybe they're really good at creating like album artwork. How do you know, or where's that line, if there is one, when you're kind of doing too much, where you're just kind of taking anything and everything and you're kind of overwhelming yourself?
I try not to do that for myself because I know that my brain will just fry. So it's important for me that I end up balancing out the amount of time that I spend on any project. So I try not to take anything overboard. I really know my limits, and I set boundaries when necessary. So I really don't take things that far to the point where I go crazy. That's just like, it's unhealthy.
And I know like a lot of beginning artists, maybe they're fresh out of school, or maybe they're fresh out of high school or college, and they're like, okay, I need to make a name for myself, and they just start taking anything and everything. And then, maybe 6 months to a year, they're like, I'm just so overwhelmed, I'm burned out. I'm not having any more creative juices. I'm done. Like, I can't do this anymore. And then they kind of throw in the towel for, another year to take a break. And then they kind of start realizing, like, I need to get back into this. And I think, now that you're a professional, you have a huge, catalog of projects you worked on and clients, you're able to say, like, yeah, I'll take that project on, or you know what, that's, that's not really of interest to me, or that's not going to really benefit me, or lastly, I'm not going to enjoy working on it. So where's kind of that line where you kind of decided that and found that out for yourself?
I would say probably in late 2015, early 2016 was when I really started saying no to more projects. Anything that I felt like, it mostly came down to the music. If I didn't enjoy the music, it was a no. I'm not going to just take on any project just for the sake of taking it on and for the sake of the money. Like, for me, at the end of the day, the most important aspect of it is the music, and if I am able to connect with it. And if I'm not, then I'm not even going to try. Like, I'm not even going to force myself to work on a project that just doesn't feel like it would be fulfilling for me. And that's that's like, I don't want to say that in terms of like, oh, that person's not good or whatever. It's just, I don't connect with it, and not everybody connects with everything, and that's okay. And for me, when situations like that occur where I'm just not connecting with the music, or, the project doesn't really feel all that exciting, I pass on it, and that's just okay. There are, when you say no to one thing, you're saying yes to another thing, and vice versa. So for me, that's what's most important is, am I really connecting with this person? Am I connecting with this project? And, that's the important part for me.
That's a really good quote. I really like that. When you say yes to one project, you're saying no to another. And when you say no to one project, you're saying yes to another. That says a lot, and it's just basically picking and choosing your battles. Let's say you're taking on all this work. You're saying yes to everything, but you find out that you're not enjoying it. You're not happy. How can that take a toll on your mental? Like, you kind of come to this realization, like you hit rock bottom and you're like, I don't enjoy doing this. but you actually do. It's just because you're saying yes to projects that you're not enjoying working on.
Right. Well, I mean, at that point, I would say just stop taking on that amount of work because, yeah, it does take a certain mental toll. And I mean, I can only imagine that it would feel terrible. I really can't imagine having to say yes to everything just for the money, because that just feels like I'm putting myself in a position where I would be unhappy. And that's why for me, I know I put myself kind of in a corner in the sense that there aren't necessarily that many projects that are fulfilling, but at the same time, when they do occur, it's amazing. And so, yeah, I mean, there are certain projects that I do just because, yeah, it's passive income. I need to do it. And that's just a necessary part of being able to sustain your career, especially as a freelancer. But when it comes to some of the more important projects, you really have to be careful with what you pick and choose because, if you get into a place where mentally you're not doing well and you find yourself in a rut or you've just hit rock bottom, like you said, I mean, it's so hard to be able to get out of that sort of situation. And that's something that I think just mental health in general is something that is very important to me and I think very important, at least in terms of keeping it an open conversation in the music industry and in entertainment in general, because it's such a hard place to be in. And when I say that, I mean being, an artist or some sort of creative person within the industry is really hard. It's not meant for everyone. And a lot of people go without saying anything or asking for help. And then, something terrible happens. And that's just really unfortunate. And the fact that certain people feel like they can't seek out help or it's just not necessary or they'll be judged or whatever the case may be is so disheartening and it's really sad. And I want to make sure that at least I am open about my own issues or anything that I'm going through, again, so that if somebody is to see or hear about it, they feel a little bit less alone and they know for a fact that there is some solution to whatever it is that they're going through.
And realizing that you're not alone. Like there are people that are going through similar things. So how can the listeners and fans and whatever keep up with you and your work and follow you or even reach out and ask you any questions on anything you had said during the show?
Yeah, so if you want, you can find me on Instagram at Elyn Kazarian. That's ELYNKAZARIAN. You can also check out my website. That's ElynKazarian.com. You can find me on Facebook. If you want to add me, go ahead. It really doesn't matter. But you can contact me on Instagram if you want. So, yeah.
Perfect. And I will put all of your links in the show notes below as well so people can easily reach out and follow you if they're interested in following you and keeping up with you. So thanks again for being on the show. We had a great conversation. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and connect with everybody else as well.
Likewise, Lennon. Thank you so much.
There it is. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Miss Elyn Kazarian. She is such an incredible graphic designer, and her work absolutely speaks for itself. And I'm so glad that we connected because I'm hoping eventually one day I'll have the honor to work with Miss Kazarian. And she talked so much about all kinds of different topics that truly resonated with me. And the last one being like mental health and taking care of yourself and how you shouldn't always take on so many projects, because I've experienced it. I'm sure other people have experienced it, and it's a very common thing within the music industry and entertainment industry. We all feel the need to take on all this work when we're just getting started. We want to build up our portfolio, and unfortunately that comes at the toll of our mental health and our physical health. And it's just not good, because if you're burned out, then you're not able to work on anything. So I really liked what Elyn had talked about when you say yes to something, you're saying no to another thing. And when you're saying no to one thing, you're saying yes to another. And that really resonated with me, and I'm sure it'll resonate with you. So I just wanted to, thank you for tuning in this week. Lastly, I would encourage you to subscribe to my mailing list, as it helps me notify you when new episodes like this are live. I would also encourage you to support me on Patreon, as it helps me work with you, and all the money that I make through Patreon will go directly back into the show so I can make it better for all of you. I would also encourage a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts, as it greatly helps me grow the show and help it be discovered by new listeners, or whatever other platform you use to listen to podcasts on. If there's able to leave a rating or a review, I would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, there is a guest request form in the show notes as well, so if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, please fill it out or send it over to them to fill out, and I will definitely reach out if they are a good fit for the show. So thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode with Miss Elyn Kazarian. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with her, and I'll chat with you next week on When Life Hands You Lemons.